Hey, folks, welcome back to the Contrarians. Here's another episode of our regular version, which is the version that we started with. In this version of the Contrarians, this is where one of us in the hot seat picks a record from a band that is often overlooked or not usually considered their best record, and they champion it as their favorite or the best record from that band's discography. We do have a Patreon, so go check us out there, martinpopoff.com, for all the latest news on his books and everything that he's got going on. I'm going to throw it over to Martin to give us a quick history of the group, and then we're going to jump right into Cheap Trick and what Martin says is their best album.
All right, thanks, Marco. Yeah, so we're talking about Cheap Trick this time. We usually give a little quick history of the band. So this is a band. First album was produced by Jack Douglas, came out in 1977. Kiss took a shine to them, took them out on tour. I saw them on that tour supporting Love Gun. It was 78, 79. Someone corrected me last time. Somewhere around there in Montreal when we were on one of these cross-country vacations. But it was Kiss at their finest and biggest, and Cheap Trick was supporting, which was kind of cool. They obviously went on In Color. Then they had kind of a breakout hit with the At Budokan album, really weird, but triple platinum album. I Want You to Want Me to became their big hit. And then they had another big hit with Surrender. The Heaven Tonight album is platinum. Dream Police is platinum. The one after that with the song Dream Police, In Color, their second album, I think that's platinum as well. And then things started to take a little bit of a slide. All Shook Up went gold. One on One went gold. So essentially, the band kind of didn't do so hot through this time. I should say who's in the band. We got Robin Zander, Rick Nielsen, the comedic guitarist with all the funny guitars and the little hat on and the short hair, right? Robin Zander is the smoky lead vocalist, good looking guy. Tom Peterson's the other good looking guy. And then you have Bunny Carlos, who's the other side of the comedic team with Rick, the drummer who looks like an accountant, right? Little overweight, the little glasses, always smoking a cigarette. So essentially this band, great live band. They have this great reputation from Rockford, Illinois, south of Chicago. I think it's south of Chicago. So they're considered a Chicago band. They have a bit of a resurgence with the whole outside songwriting doctors, with the Flame and the Busted album and the Lap of Luxury album. So they're having Lap of Luxury is the big one at this time. And then after that, they basically become this great classic rock band who's out always touring, playing lots and lots of shows and putting lots and lots of albums out. That's the kind of cool thing. They had a resurgence and they've been making records ever since. Along the way, they had one lineup change with Tom Peterson quitting the band right around when All Shook Up was coming out, replaced by John Brandt. He was around for 4 albums. That would be One on One, Next Position, Please. What are the other ones? Standing on the Edge and The Doctor. Later on, they had a falling out with Bunny Carlos after many, many, many years, kind of, about dollars, more or less. Oddly, he's still listed as a band member, and Dax Nielsen, Rick's son, has been their touring drummer for a long time, and really the drummer on the albums as well for a long time. But for some odd legal reason, I believe Bunny is still listed as a member of the band. They just put out their 20th album, In Another World. So they've been very busy all through the years. So there's your sort of canned history of Cheap Trick. As Marco says, the whole point of this show is when we fully in our heart of hearts believe our favorite album by a band is not the main choice that people would pick. So my choice for contrarian choice of favorite Cheap Trick album is this one right here, All Shook Up. So there you go. The front cover is based on the Rennie Magritte painting, Time Transfixed, with the steam train coming out of the side here. So this is their 1980 album. It's produced by George Martin. Every album before that, except for the first album, was produced by Tom Werman. And this is actually a good point. One of the reasons that I love this album so much, well, it's not the big reason, but let me put it this way. George Martin, I think, does a better job producing than Tom Werman did on the last ones. I've started to really have the pretty humorless, cardboardy, bassless, trebleless production of the key albums, the golden period albums, really start to bother me. And that's in conjunction with, I've had this discussion on my Facebook lately about the latest Cheap Trick productions, and I'm finding them being a little bit Tom Werman-ish in that there's something, even when they do a heavy song, it doesn't sound heavy anymore. There's just something lacking in the dynamics of the punch of the bass drum, or how much distortion is on the guitar. The guitar is kind of this weird, clean, nebulous zone. So something's really bothering me about Cheap Trick productions lately and in the Tom Werman years, and that's why that's one of the reasons I love this album so much. And it's always been my favorite Cheap Trick, but I've got a couple others that come close. The Red Ant album from 1987, just called Cheap Trick, sometimes called 1997. Great album of the later period. And I've always had a soft spot for this one as well. Next position, please. So those are the ones that are also contrarian choices that I like quite a bit. There's a record promo little insert thing for the 1997 album. But this George Martin production on this, what I love about it is there's a lot of layers and a lot of sound put on. Like opening track and the biggest single on the album, Stop This Game, a magnificent Cheap Trick song, one of my favorite songs by the band of all time. Kind of a ballad, kind of heavy, kind of poppy all at once, lots going on. But it has that kind of Phil Spector-ish sort of filled out sound. But I do notice that there's still some Tom Werman qualities to this album in that it is lacking a little bit at the bottom end as well, and also the guitars are not that beefed up. What Rick Nielsen is doing. By the way, Rick Nielsen writes almost everything on this album, which is pretty interesting. So he is really the dominant writer in the band. But yeah, apparently lyrics and music are mostly Rick Nielsen on this. So the production is better than the Tom Werman albums, but it's not as good as the UFO album, No Place to Run, which was also produced by George Martin. That album came out 8 months earlier than this album. That I really like the production on, and it sounds nothing like this. Like it's a whole different sound. It's more of like an analog, bassy sound, a lot of separation, really old school sounding, but not Beatles old school, more like heavy 70s sounding old school, which I really like. And you're not really getting that on this, but do love this album a lot because, a few reasons. I mean, it is quite heavy. There's a lot of heaviness on it. So I mentioned Stop This Game. I'll just go through the tracks quickly. Just Got Back is heavy and rocking and swinging and a little rockabilly-ish. Baby Loves to Rock is also heavy and rock and roll, and it's got that stop-start thing to it and the big chords and a really good roaring Robin Zander vocal. I love Robin's vocals. Can't Stop It, But I'm Gonna Try is one of those good, dark, poppy, ballad-esque songs, one of my favorite Cheap Trick songs as well. World's Greatest Lover is a good acoustic ballad, but it's not a sappy song doctor ballad. It's got acoustic guitar. It's got a little bit of that psychedelic Beatles thing going on it. High Priest of Rhythmic Noise is one of their heavy tunes, and they don't have a lot of heavy tunes. Off Wiedersehen is my favorite heavy tune by them, of course, but heavy, complex, layered. It's got a really cool kind of pre-chorus, and that it's such a pity what's a poor boy to do part in it, which is really cool. And Robin's just screaming away on it. Love Comes a Tumbling Down is also heavy and fast. Another heavy tune on here. I Love You Honey, But I Hate Your Friends is also heavy. Little barrel house piano in there. It's like heavy Rolling Stones, this one. So a lot of really rocking tracks on this album, which I really like. Go For the Throat is kind of pomp rock, proggy. It's got a lot going on, a real stop-start thing. Again, some Beatles things in it. Because they had George Martin producing, and because Cheap Trick were always considered a Beatlesque band, kind of Beatlesque, Who-esque. There's a lot of little kind of Beatles little tips and tricks in here. There's a plane and the Go Back to Russia or something like that in it, and a few other little references. And then the last song on it, Who to King, Only song on the whole album that I don't like. But it's only 2 minutes 18 long. It's not really a song. It's more like a Wipeout style drum thing. Bun gets a credit, and then there's this big gang vocal, Huda King, and all this. So it's more like just a ha ha funny closer. But the rest of the album, you've got 9 completely solid tracks. And the other thing I wanted to mention is there's a little bit of if you look at our Deep Purple Contrarians episode from way back where I picked Perfect Strangers as my favorite Deep Purple album, a lot of my argument there was because it had way more songs that I liked a lot than other albums that were considered great. And I noticed that when I did my due diligence on this episode and went back and played, the key suspects, and I went through them, and I was finding 3-4 songs that I definitely was not a fan of on those big records. And that I did not find that on this record at all. This album was a little bit derided at the time for being a little bit too complex and eclectic. But I don't really hear a lot of that on this. I mean, I think that went too far, and a lot of that seemed to be triggered by the album cover, frankly. And probably the intro to Stop This Game, where it kind of takes a while to get going and there's a lot going on. So Stop This Game kind of felt like it was it was the one thing that made people kind of go down that road. But this is a very accessible album. There's nothing wrong with it in that respect. So there you go. And as I was saying, I mean, they had a string of platinums all in a row with that triple platinum, and then All Shook Up only went gold. The follow-up actually went gold as well, which is pretty interesting. One-on-One went gold. Here's my Dream Police. Did I hold this up yet? So this is one of the suspects for greatest Cheap Trick album, but I'm sticking with it. I like the heaviness. I love the complexity. I love all those layers that go on it. I think George Martin does a very Phil Spector kind of job of being very ambitious with the production. So there you go. All Shook Up, Cheap Trick, greatest Cheap Trick album. Tell me how I'm wrong, Marco.
Well, you know what? Like, honestly, like going back and like looking at this record and putting this up as a Contrarians episode, this is almost the like perfect Contrarians episode to do, because this is a record that when it came out, especially, was like kind of commercially and critically kind of, it didn't do as well as the last 3 records. It was received very indifferently, like commercially and critically. But it's a record that if you like kind of look into things, you look at like user reviews and you kind of look at how this album trends lately, especially like with users, it's one of those records that like, if you just kind of ignore how it was received when it came out, it is like the perfect kind of contrarian album to pick, because there's a lot of people that this record is like a president that was ignored, that over the years people kind of looked back objectively and started realizing was actually did some pretty good stuff when he was in office, right? So some presidents kind of like go up in time because of stuff like that, because they weren't popular when they left office, but over the years, this is one of those types of records. So this is actually a great record to pick on the Contrarians, because had it been a platinum record, it had one of those singles been a hit, this easily could have been up there with In Color and Heaven Tonight and those types of records. And to be honest, I wasn't super familiar with this record. I was more familiar with those records, Dream Police, even more familiar with like Lap of Luxury and Busted and The Doctor and stuff like that. But like this, subjectively, I quite like the record. Actually, there's a lot of things I do like about it. There are some, you can hear the Beatles influence, especially on World's Greatest Lover. And that's not just me saying it, like you said it. And almost every review you read, you see that World's Greatest Lover sounds just like John Lennon, or World's Greatest Lover sounds like the Beatles. Like you can hear those influences, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I also hear a lot of like Ramones in this record. I hear a lot of like guitar driven rock, classic rock and roll, classic hard rock, classic rock. And I love the Beatles, I love the Ramones, and I love Cheap Trick, and I love the record. Like you named a lot of the songs I like off of Baby Loves to Rock, Just Got Back. And like you mentioned, the last song is a quick kind of 2-minute thing. That's kind of the trend with a lot of these songs. Just Got Back is 2 minutes. And that's a great classic sounding rock and roll track. Love Comes a Tumbling Down is another, like, there are a lot of the songs fall in that kind of mid-high tempo. They're kind of heavy. The guitar is kind of driving. I like this record a lot. Objectively, um, I mean, like the record was the one to break the platinum streak. In Color, Dream Police, Heaven Tonight all went platinum. Budokan all went platinum. This one went gold. So it broke that streak. It had a single that charted. Stop the Game charted at number 42. It wasn't a smash hit, especially if you compare it to some of the other Cheap Trick singles that came out, like I Want You to Want Me, which was a mega success for them. In terms of set list representation, it comes in at number 7th as 7th studio album represented live. So a comparison would be the top song played live from All Shook Up is Baby Loves to Rock, and that was played over 400 times live. I Want You to Want Me is their top song, and that was played probably at every performance they ever do, with over 1,700 performances played live. So the top 3 records that you'll see in the live set list representation are In Color, Dream Police, and Heaven Tonight. Even Lap of Luxury gets played more often live than this record, which is interesting. Well, actually, no, it's not, because Lap of Luxury had a big hit and that was a platinum selling record, but it's not an album that is perceived by the fans to be one of the better ones, is what I mean. Okay. In terms of like reviews, critic reviews, I use AllMusic a lot. AllMusic gave the record 2 stars. So what they said was Cheap Trick's first genuinely disappointing record. All Shook Up is pretty much a complete botch. Wow. AllMusic goes on to blame George Martin's production and Rick Nielsen's songwriting, also stating that the band has run out of hooks and interesting lyrics, and points to songs like High Priest of Rhythmic Noise and World's Greatest Lover as substandard boogie, which is interesting because World's Greatest Lover is kind of, like you said, ballad-esque or even almost kind of epic Beatles-ish sounding. So I don't hear the boogie in that song necessarily.
High Priest isn't boogie either, you know?
I can show you the review. That's what he says. So the user reviews are actually generally pretty favorable. I did dig in to grab a couple of negative ones, but they kind of go more in your favor if you look at them overall. But here's the negative ones. If you want to listen to good old Cheap Trick genius, I put their first 3 records on. This was honestly a pretty weak piece of work. Another one, George Martin sure gave a rich audiophile sound, but it's a bit too lush compared to the grittier previous albums. Somehow Sir George manages to make Cheap Trick sound like Boston, and that ain't a good thing. One last one, All Shook Up. Hey, even great bands get to make lousy records once in a while. Cheap Trick and Rockford prove that, Cheap Trick 2 and Rockford prove that the guy's mojo hadn't been lost forever, merely misplaced. If you look at just ranking consensus, so best ever album says All Shook Up landing at number 8. Top 3, Budokan, Heaven Tonight, In Color. Ranker has All Shook Up landing at number 10. So Ranker is fans ranking the albums. So this isn't just one guy ranking them or a group of critics deciding which record is best. So these are fans voting on this, and they put All Shook Up at number 10. Top 3 are Heaven Tonight, Dream Police, In Color, which is the trend. Heaven Tonight, Dream Police, In Color, Cheap Trick, the self-titled one, Budokan. If you look at Rate Your Music, Return of Rock, Louder Sound, Ultimate Classic Rock, I could go through each one. Actually, All Shook Up on Rate Your Music was 5, Return of Rock was number 5, Louder Sound was number 6, Ultimate Classic Rock was number 5. The top 3 was usually In Color, Heaven Tonight, Dream Police. That's the trend. I would probably say that, I like All Shook Up. But I would probably put In Color as number 1 for me subjectively, just because of songs like Your All Talk. Like you listen to the solos, the performances. I know you're more of like a production guy. I'm more of like a song guy. So when you say that the production of maybe the earlier records kind of start to bother you a little bit more when you listen to something like All Shook Up, you appreciate the production better. For me, it's still more about songs. And I kind of think like, even Heaven Tonight, like just the harmonies, the guitar, High Roller, even the song, the title track, Heaven Tonight, is kind of like cool and eerie at the same time. Of course, they do the California Man cover from The Move. So they are influenced by a lot of that like classic 60s rock and roll bands. Dream Police, Gonna Raise Hell, Writing on the Wall is cool on that one. But I would probably agree with most of, well, not the rankings because the rankings, it actually is pretty low, but I'd probably agree with you that this is a great contrarian pick.
Mm-hmm.
I think the top three are kind of set in stone, and this could probably easily slide in there as somebody's subjective favorite, or like it fits right in there at like number 4, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, it's a great pick, and I like the record a lot. I would pick In Color as my favorite.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I remember at the time In Color not being particularly well received. It was considered a little bit like their Van Halen 2. It's a blue second album, I suppose, kind of oddly. I did a whole episode of that in my History in 5 Songs podcast on blue second albums. I don't know if I included that one. But anyways, the other thing that I seem to remember, and I may correct me, listeners, if I've got this wrong, but this seems to be one of those albums that I remember as being one of those kings of the delete bins, when you would go record shopping and see a record for cheap all the time. And that usually happened when expectations are high and they make a lot of copies of something. And then they have to delete or discount them, either with a notch in the corner or a hole through the corner. Because I remember Queen Jazz being like that as well. And yet this was a gold album, and Jazz for Queen was a big album. So there's certain albums that I remember like that, seeing a lot in the delete bins, and this seems to remind me of one of those. And when you see that, it kind of knocks the band's reputation down a little bit. And I also want to mention, I think the production on the very first album is really good, that Jack Douglas does on that, and the songs are amazing too. So I would pick this All Shook Up as my favorite. And then, as I mentioned, the Red Ant, the second self-titled, is up there. Next Position Please is up there, but I would probably even put the debut above the next 3 for me. So I love the debut. It's got a real kind of combative Who quality to it, the most, and I think it is a little more tough on the production end of things, and a little more dangerous on the percussion and the drumming and stuff. It's not as tamped down. But yeah, that's interesting to see. What I find really surprising from all of that great research you did there is the whole idea of how far down the list this is. I mean, the highest you're saying it's even coming at all is in the 5 to 8 zone, which is, so they're putting probably all the early ones above that, and maybe somebody's, hair metal fond memories of that one being the first album they ever got, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. Right. But yeah, all their, as time goes on, I think a lot of people are even going to find the likes of Rockford or maybe Special One or some of these later ones pretty high up on the list too. But
yeah, and you'll see typically when you look at the lists, what you'll see is those first 4 records and Budokan. So it's kind of like there's like a wall of 5 records, that are just standard across almost all the ranking lists.
Yeah,
if they decide to list Budokan.
But over here in record nerdland, we never allow live albums, right?
So, no, we don't.
We never really talk about that because to me, a live kind of cheats. It cheats in terms of it being heavy, and it cheats in terms of it being a greatest hits, right? So,
and not being completely live either. So.
Yeah, right. But we always like to talk about kind of the songwriting and the songs that came as a bank of 8 or 10 songs at the time, blah blah blah, right? So
studio records, yeah.
So it's pretty interesting seeing how low and how actually contrarian this is. I'm a little surprised that it is so contrarian, but there you go. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Marco, anything else to add, or should we wrap up? What do you think?
No, other than that, I mean, we got our Patreon. Give us a like and subscribe. Comment below if you agree or disagree. Other than that, no. Do you have any new books coming out or anything that you want to talk about?
Not really. I do have some stuff coming on the way from the UK. So I've got the new Nazareth Visual History and the Yes Visual History. But right now I do have a good supply of all those other big coffee table books from the UK. So I've got the Thin Lizzy, the Uriah Heep, the Blue Oyster Cult, and the Van Halen, which is rare having those all in stock. But that's it. Otherwise, just kind of in writing mode. But yeah, that's it. Let us know. Oh yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention is, as a sister listen to this one, go listen to our worst album edition on Cheap Trick. So we did one there as well, and as a hint, it's a one word title that starts with B. So yeah, go listen to that episode as well, and you can get the flip side to this one, which is about the best Cheap Trick album. So for Marco and myself, we shall sign off and go listen to some Cheap Trick.
That's it, dude.